Welcome to the Worship Keys YouTube channel. My name is Carson Bruce. So glad you're here. We talk all things music theory, gear, industry, and ministry for your worship keys playing. If this episode is beneficial for you or you have any questions as you continue to watch, feel free to comment below, and I'd love to hear any feedback that you have along the way. So let's get into today's episode. I know you've always had very insightful, amazing, strong opinions on songs, bro. So I want us to talk about worship songs because most of the listeners are at churches. They are maybe small town Alabama, maybe big town. Who knows where they are? Maybe Atlanta. But wherever they are with their church community or just individually, I would just love to give them some tips and tricks for making them a better songwriter. So I guess with that, share some of your biggest pet peeves, specifically in the worship genre, if you can. Tell us a little bit about that, man.
So first, I'll quote Ryan Tedder. If you don't know who Ryan Tedder is, he's lead singer of One Republic, and he did an episode of this podcast called And the Writer Is, where he's talking about songwriting and whatever.
Oh, cool.
And he said this thing that I so deeply believe. I'm like, that's so true. He said, the distance between a good song and a great song is the Grand Canyon. That is so true. As far as career songwriting goes, you will never open a door with a good song. Good songs are a dime a dozen. Your server at any restaurant in town is writing good songs, and they're probably writing great songs, and like they're on their way. Writing a good song is not the challenge. Writing a great song is really a challenge, and it's the attention to detail and the things that you asked, the pet peeves of songs and stuff. So these details matter is kind of all of that, what I'm saying. Prosody errors are a thing. So prosody is when I call them prosody errors, but it's really an emphasis syllable problem. So like, because prosody is technically when the prose, so the lyric and the melody match together. So it's like, like our God is greater, our God is higher. So higher, it goes up, or our God is higher than it. That's what it is. Our God is higher than any other. Having high on the high part of the melody, like stuff like that, where it's like, oh, that makes sense. Like you wouldn't want to go, something is lower than low. It's like, oh, saying low on a high, that would be a prosody error technically. Right. So think about those things. The biggest one is emphasis syllables, where it's like the emphasis matters. Here's a perfect example.
Okay.
Unconditionally by Katy Perry. Everybody rags in the industry so much because it's unconditional. And it's like, why are you emphasizing shun so much? Like no one says it like that. It's unconditional. Everyone puts the emphasis on unconditional, the did. And so why are we doing unconditional? Like it's so unnatural. So like again, for a pop song, you can kind of get away with more because like there's a phrase that's used about the two writing towns. LA is pop town and its melody is king. And then Nashville is lyric is king. Okay. In LA, you kind of put whatever words you feel like over a great melody. And then in Nashville, you figure out what you want to say, and then you find a melody that doesn't get in the way of your message. It's kind of the traditional ways that both these towns work. Primarily writing in Christian music and country music, they're both kind of lyrically defined genres, which is kind of what makes them work so well in Nashville and why lyric is king here. So like a great country song is defined by what it says. Like, oh, how did it do a really cool play on words? Is it like a playful phrase or like all of that kind of stuff? Or like the setting and the storytelling, the narrative, like all of that kind of stuff. Whereas like a pop song is not really so much that. Right. And then like in faith music, it's so much about what you're saying. Like it's driven by, a genuine connection to something bigger than yourself and God and faith. If you sing bad theology with a great melody, people are going to be like, oh, I don't know about that. Yeah. But yeah, so that's a big thing is emphasis syllables. And you'll notice, like, if you listen to great songs, like, they don't have those errors. And you can hear them in I hear that a lot in, like, beginning worship songs where people are putting emphasis on the wrong syllables and that kind of stuff. And it's usually, like, you can just feel your gut. But the point is, like, if you say the word, that's how you should sing it. Like, if you say unconditionally, then you should sing it in a way that matches that cadence of unconditionally. So un and di, get the emphasis. So, and again, there are exceptions to all these rules. So there are some times where it works, but that's one of them. A lazy rhyme scheme is a big turnoff for me, like that keeps a song from being really compelling. At a writing place here in town, the Wi-Fi password was no rhyming face with grace, which I thought was hilarious. Yeah. Sometimes simple is better. And like, if that's the thing that your gut wanted to say, then sometimes that's right. And you need to listen to that feeling. But sometimes like maybe put a pin in the first thought that comes up and be like, well, what else is a good rhyme here? What else makes sense? I think, but more intentionally talking about the rhyme scheme itself. So like there's the whole thing of like using interesting rhyme words, like having your rhyme words are the most important words of your song. So whatever your external rhymes are, that's like the word bank of your song. So like that's going to paint the schema for what your song is about. Beyond choosing the words, the rhyme scheme itself, don't just like A, B, A, B. You know, like make it interesting. Vary the length of your phrases where it's like A, B, B, A, C, C, you know, or like A, B, B, C, B, B, you know, like where it's like you have a more complicated, so it's like long phrase that ends in an A rhyme, and then like two shorter ones that internally rhyme with one another, and then another one that rhymes back to the first line with an A, and then two that rhyme with each other. You know, just something that keeps it a little more, so it's not just like A, B, A, B.
Right,
you know, it's like that just like loses the listener sometimes. It's just not very interesting to listen to, especially if your words are also not interesting. Yeah. So that's how, like, I think the downfall of worship music is it's really hard to make it interesting because, good advice from my friend John Sell, he said writing Christian music is taking pictures of the sun, because we're all writing about the same things. So it's like fighting to be like, okay, how do I make this picture different? Like if you were to wake up tomorrow and like for the next 30 days, take a picture of the sun, how would you make each picture stand out? Like sometimes it's going to be in focus where everything else looks really dark, so you can kind of get some detail on the sun. And then sometimes it's going to be really blown out, but there's a leaf in the foreground. And like sometimes it'll be like there's a person laughing with the sun in the background. You know, so it's like it's always taking pictures of the sun. So it's trying to find a creative angle on it. So I think that's what's hard about worship is like the truth hasn't changed. You can't write new truth, because there's not new truth. So it's like trying to write the same thing that we've always heard, but have it feel new and fresh and interesting. I'm so inspired by the song Firm Foundation. Cody Carnes, like a friend of mine, Austin, wrote it with them and Chandler. And I'm just like, oh, that song is just, it does such a good job of writing something that I have heard 1,000 times in a way that I've never heard it. Like, and lyrically, if you look at the song, it's not like the craziest lyric. It's just the melody makes it so believable. There's just something about it that feels honest, but it's very meticulous. And again, they're not using crazy rhyme words. Like it's not some like off of left center kind of thing, but it just feels very compelling in the melody, and the structure is very intentional. Right. The whole like he won't fail, like it has a really good motif. Like it feels like it builds tension, then there's a payoff at the end.
Absolutely.
So a lot of those things with rhyme. Oh, this is another big one. I could make this list like 10,000 things long, but okay. So there's a pop rule for writing melody that anytime you add a syllable or like kind of alter a melody a little bit, it's a new melody. It's not a different version of the same melody. That is a new melody. Okay. And you want to limit how many melodies are in your song, because like that's why things like Gyra work. Gyra, you are enough. Gyra, you are no, like it's like it's repetitive. It's like easy to catch on to. You're a good father. It's who you are. It's who you are. It's who you are. And I'm loved by you. It's who I am. Who I am. Who I am. It's like it's repetitive, so it's easy to catch on to. There's not a ton of like there's meat on the bones in the meaning, but it's not this like melodic steak. It's more of like melodic snack. Theological steak, you know. If you were trying to do, you're a good father. It's who you are. It's just who you are. It's who you are. Like if you change one of them, that's a new melody. Right. It's not a variation on the same. It's a new melody. So now your chorus has one more melody than it had before, and you want to try and limit the number of melodies if you're trying to be digestible. That's good. So the parallelism matters. Like if you're trying to just like sneak in a syllable because like, oh, but this lyric is like, no. Don't do it. Unless the lyric is like the best lyric of the song and like it's got to be in there and it's the only interesting piece of your song, and if you lose it, the song isn't worth cutting. Don't change that melody, especially when you're writing worship music, which I'm assuming most of the people listening to this podcast are interested in writing worship music. Like people are trying to sing along to your song. So if you change it up on them too often, they're going to be like, well, I tried to sing along and you tripped me up. Why are you misleading me? You know, like, because the whole point is like verse 1 teaches them the melody and verse 2, they're singing it with you. Right. So it's like, so if verse 2 is immediately different because you added some syllables because, to be honest, you were too lazy to clean it up. Like, then you're now harming the listener. And I would rather a song be really hard to write and really easy to sing than be really easy to write and really hard to sing.
Say that again, man. Say that again.
I would rather a song be really hard to write and really easy to sing than a song be really easy to write and really hard to sing.
Wow.
Like, the more work you put in, the less work they have to put in.
That's good.
You know?
What are some of your favorite worship songs?
Oh, great question.
And why?
Like I said, Firm Foundation, I think is fantastic.
And I love that too, because even in the bridge, they have they jump a fifth in the melody, and then they jump a sixth, and people still. I mean, I've been in rooms just still thousands still sing it,
and I think things like that are about balance too, because you can kind of look at. Like, everything's like sweet and salty. You know, you're trying to balance out like you'd balance a dish. You don't want just like all sweet notes. You don't want all one thing. So you don't want just like this kind of cadence really drawn. Like, it gets so boring if you just keep that. But you don't want it to be like singing this fast and doing this stuff and like, you don't want it to be all that. So trying to like splice those together. So like in that song, rain came, wind blew, but my house was built on you. So it's like it has this drawn outness to it. Because it's in 6/8, has this swing and anthemic whatever. Absolutely. And then it's more punchy. Yes. So it's like contrasting those keeps it interesting. Sometimes makes it even easier to follow because you're not lulling yourself to sleep with the boring melody.
Right.
You know? Favorite worship songs. Let's see that one. I mean, Goodness of God is brilliant, but I mean, that's not news. You know?
Right. I love Goodness of God.
But then King of Kings.
Yes.
Melodically, Chef's Kiss. Like the majesty, like so good.
That leading tone. How often do you use that leading tone in your writing, bro?
Yeah, it's
that
like
7/1 is that point of tension. That's
that's a whole thing toolkit, you know? And I'm like kind of like firing off random stuff. I feel like at this point, but so half steps. Okay, so someone who like leans on instinct instead of like the song math piece of it, like they would be like, man, I don't know why this melody just feels so emotional. Like it just feels so like vulnerable. And it's like, well, that's because it's using half steps. Because half steps feel very tender and fragile for some reason. Like, I don't know why our brains perceive them that way, but like, so the half step is between the 7 and the 1 and the 3 and the 4, as you know. So like any melody that uses that has this floatiness to it. Like I think about it as like a structure, like a house or something. And that one feels more like a little wavy, like rocking back and forth, like this emotional delicateness to it. And so it has like almost a brokenness to the melody. Whereas things that are pentatonic, so it's mostly whole steps and, you know, it doesn't include the 4 or the 7, they feel anthemic. Like if you want something to feel declarative, don't use half steps. Like just take out the 4 and the 7 and write a pentatonic melody, and it will feel like it is stilts on stilts, the stacked house that can, like the waves can crash and they're just going to hit the stilts, not touch the house. Like it's going to feel bulletproof. Right. But sometimes you want to have some delicate whatever, because what's the song? When did it end? Da, 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 da. Like it's tons of half steps, so it feels like, oh my gosh, she's like so fragile, and if you sneeze around her, she'll shatter. You know, like and I'm not. That's not shade. I love Billie Eilish, but like that. It has this delicateness to it, whereas I will build my life upon your love. It is a firm foundation. 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 5, 3, 2. Like it's pentatonic. So if you want something to have this bulletproof, declarative thing, stay pentatonic. If you want it to be this delicate, vulnerable, pull your listener in moment, use half steps. That's just kind of how some melodies work. And then again, you can do contrast with that. If you want a certain word to feel very emotional and the rest of it to feel like if you're lyric, there's one word that feels really vulnerable and the rest of it feels really bulletproof. That's kind of the point of your song. Then on the bulletproof parts, use that pentatonic melody. And then on the vulnerable words, use the half step stuff. So it's like you can kind of sprinkle that in once you understand that and kind of find a melody that serves what you're trying to make somebody feel. That's
really good, man. I want to get you some hot takes.
Yeah, okay.
There's a lot of songs that repeat itself like a lot, right? 12 times saying the same thing. I'm fine with that, right? Because you have like angels around the throne saying holy, holy, holy. Yep. What do you think with really repetitious bridges or choruses? Some people in some communities have problems with songs that are like this. There's multiple ways to go around it, but basically they think if you say it really simply and over again, it's actually not deep enough. And I'm like, I don't know if I can agree with that. And a lot of I've heard too people say for a good song, you say one thing and say it well.
I agree with that. That's my philosophy.
You know, is that your
I
philosophy?
think bad songs say 2 or 3 things. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I'm trying to say too much
Yep.
all within the verses, and it's very clunky and it's just so thick and might read well, might be very thick theologically.
I also think bad worship songs make a point. Like the point of a worship song is not to tell someone what to believe. It's to invite them into a moment with God. And so like a lot of my prayers don't have a lot of theology in them. I'm trying to write songs that are prayers for people, not that are correcting their theology. I think about writing worship songs. I'm like, I'm trying to write prayers that I want to pray. You want it to be theologically correct because you're putting words in someone else's mouth to pray to God. So like that is super important.
Yes.
But like, I'm not trying to write stuff that is to correct someone's theology. That's going to come across as preachy. It's probably not going to be very emotionally compelling. It's going to be very heady and cerebral. Hymns are not exceptions to that rule. I think a lot of hymns can be very emotional. Yes. Like I feel Amazing Grace when I'm like, oh my gosh, like where would I be without grace? You know, like I think we kind of get numb to some of the language because we've had that song for hundreds of years. But like, if you really look at the language of that song, like it's emotional. And I love songs like In Christ Alone. It's so bulletproof in its theology. Like that's one of my favorite like hymn style songs. So again, I think they just like hit a home run with that song. Awesome. So I don't think it's like a one size fits all. Like that song is what it was supposed to be.
Right.
But that song still makes me feel something, even though it uses this old language that has this like, I don't know, like a valiance and like this like kind of just feels like this old, like I'm stepping into something that's bigger than me and older than me. Like, and that's what I think works so well with that song. And I don't wish it had like a really repetitive moment. I love songs like that. But, and then songs like So Will I by Hillsong, where like I could not sing that song if I don't have the lyrics in front of me because it hardly repeats a word.
Right.
It's just like, it's exposition dump, but it's one of the most beautiful songs that I've heard in years. Like it's so fantastic. But the general worship song that I'm trying to write that I love when my church does, you know, the ones that I'm like, oh yes, it's like Gratitude, Brendan Lake. That song is not trying to correct my theology. That song is not trying to teach me. People at church can correct your brain for like what you're thinking, but only God is going to correct your heart. So if you can write a song that can bypass all the people and just connect them to God, like God will work in them way better than a good lyric or a good like, ooh, I haven't thought about that before. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Dude,
like
yes.
I've never like had actual life change come from somebody saying something that was like a t-shirt line, you know, and like those are great. Like, and I try and write those. Like, I think that's important to have like quotable things. But when we sing Gratitude at church, I'm just like, man, I can't hold it together. I'm like weeping because I'm like, God, I'm so thankful. Man, all I have is a hallelujah, but like I'm gonna give it to you. You know what I'm saying?
So
like,
good.
It's a whole thing where like monks, the way that they used to meditate on truth is they would repeat the same phrase to themselves for 2 hours.
Wow.
That's what meditating on something was. You would say it over and over to yourself. And you can even change, I'm talking about emphasis syllables. You can even change the emphasis on the same phrase and it'll mean a different thing every time. So if you take the phrase like, I really want chocolate ice cream. So I really want chocolate ice cream. Or I really want chocolate ice cream. 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 Or I really want chocolate ice cream. I said like 6 different things because of what I emphasized. Yes. So one, that's happening in your songs, whether you realize it or not. If you emphasize a word, you could be saying the same words, but you meant to say something else because of your emphasis, whereas your listeners are hearing it as what you actually emphasized.
That's good.
When we sing a song like Gratitude or something that says the same words over and over, like when I just sit in it, I start to digest it a little bit more than just if you just say it as one line in a song and you just move on and it's just like, oh, there's so much going on and I don't. And again, like King of Kings doesn't really repeat that much. It kind of like says a lot. There's a lot of rich theology in it, but so it's song by song. But I think the repetitive nature, if it's something you're going to repeat, just make sure it's worth repeating.
That's good. Yeah.
You know? So I think that's the challenge, is like finding something that doesn't get old by the 10th time.
Wow. Yeah.
You know, so it's got to be something that is really worth saying.
Yeah, I love Gratitude, bro.
It wrecks me every time. And like, again, from being a worship leader and stuff, sometimes worship can be a little bit more difficult for me. Like, look past all the like, oh, they missed a chord there. Like, oh, you know, the songwriting errors or like whatever.
Yeah.
Like, because again, I'm a very like, I have opinions. So I'm like, so just trying to like get past that is not always the easiest, but that's one of those songs where I'm just like, man, I can't You could play that on an out of tune piano and miss half the chords in the song, and I'm gonna be weeping.
Was this one of your lyrics that you wrote? Was it the line, "Sometimes my attention strays from my intention"?
Maybe.
Did you write that?
I think
I remember you writing that lyric.
It sounds familiar.
And
it sounds like a thing I'd say.
Awesome. I forget the melody, but I do remember those lyrics. Like, sometimes my attention strays from my intention.
Yes.
What song was that on?
Gosh, that was a while ago.
Okay, because I remember that lyric, and I was
like,
yes,
because
I resonated with that.
Because that is very true for me. Because I'm like, because sometimes we just get so caught up in the process that we're like, oh, we started off headed north, and then like the wind got us, going a little northeast,
right?
And then it's like, oh, well, I meant to be going north, but I'm not now, and so I need to correct course a little bit,
And then also another song that you wrote that a ton of people know about just in general, but I know at JSU community, they do know Speechless was awesome. And I know I was like in the room when we were writing the second verse, and that second verse was incredible too to be a part of, but I really like the bridge, man.
Yeah, the bridge is like, dude, I could sit in that bridge.
Bro. Can you share the lyrics with that?
Your love leaves me speechless. No words could ever reach it. So hear my heart sing louder than my words could ever be.
Yes, dude. And that's one of those things where we keep repeating it.
Yep.
And it just builds every time. I think you did a slightly different progression.
Yeah, that's another thing that helps with repetition is if you change the context of something, you can see it in a different light each time. Yep.
Yes. And like Gratitude, they change into the minor, right, later on.
The Mixolydian fun stuff. Yeah.
Yes. So like, that song Speechless was really left an impact on a lot of people. And I think that's incredible with songwriting because you have that power that gift that God's given you to like really impact a lot of people. And even though that song never released or did anything, but it meant so much to a lot of people.
Yeah.
I know to me too. Sometimes I sit down and I'll just start playing it, especially just that bridge.
I still think about that one too.
So powerful. And then the way that I wish it was out somewhere, but that the bridge when it just stops about how like he leaves us speechless.
Yeah.
It's just so impactful, man. But dude, thank you so much for sharing. But maybe there's a church community or an individual who wants to start writing songs, or maybe not just individuals. Let me say church community who wants to start writing songs. How would you encourage a worship leader, worship minister, maybe even just a keys player who doesn't have like the staff power, or the power of a staff member at a church to do this? But what's your best advice for facilitating creativity for songwriting in the church? Now, I know songwriting is not meant for every church. There's very few that it's really meant for.
Totally.
But what's your best advice for a group of...
For just like trying to get people interested, or if you already have people interested?
I would say if you already have people interested,
trying to facilitate the community and cool.
Yeah, how do you foster that?
That's a great question. Do like a bi-weekly or weekly, depending on gauge the interest. If there's a bunch of interest, maybe go weekly. If there's not, maybe do once a month or but like have some regular thing where you're like, hey, on this night we're gonna get together. We're gonna have some like biscuits and gravy and some CC's pizza or just something, and we're gonna hang out, like have some fellowship, and then we're gonna like break into rooms and write. It's kind of easier for new people coming in if there's like something to write toward, like getting a North Star for the session. So if you're like, hey, so pastor is gonna go through a series in 6 weeks about grace. And we would love, if we could spend some time, like everybody in your breakouts, just try and write like even just a chorus, or try and get a verse chorus or just a bridge. Just try and write something that is like centered around grace. And maybe it's not a full song. Maybe it's a bridge where maybe it's the thing where you repeat the same line 100 times and you get everybody mad at you, Right. but just everybody try and write something about grace. This is the passage of scripture he's going to be preaching out of, or this is like the couple of passages or whatever. And like everybody trying, because then it feels like it's tailored for your church. Like that's the benefit of that kind of thing, is like you don't have to write something for the big C church because you're at a little C church also, and you can try and write, and so you can all kind of go in, and maybe nothing comes out of that, and you're all just like, okay, cool, that was fine, and then we all just are like, oh, that was really cool, that was a really good time where we all kind of talked about grace and wrote this thing that's maybe special to us, but you never played at the church. But then maybe there's a thing where it's like, oh, so they wrote this chorus, like let's tag that on at the end of when we do This Is Amazing Grace, or whatever. Let's tag on that little like thing and have like a little worship moment with it. And then that can be really inspiring to the people who are part of writing that, or even the people who who were there that night and like heard when you did like maybe you do a song share at the end where everybody kind of shares a piece and you just have a pad going and get on keys.
Right.
Everybody does their little thing and they're like, oh man, I was there the night they wrote that, and like that, and everybody's gonna feel more invested in that. They're gonna see people respond in worship to something that they were at least around when it was being created, or maybe they were a part of. And I think that can help kind of stoke the fire for a worship songwriter, is just being like, okay, people can interact with God using words that I said to God, that I was like, oh, I would want to say that to him. So awesome. I think that can help stoke the fire. Just like, make it really casual, make it fun. Don't make it a super intense, like intimidating thing. You're going to write bad songs. Most of your songs are going to be bad. And that's okay. Like, until you write like 1,000 songs, like, or maybe 100, most of your songs are going to be like, like we tried, but like you got to take at bats. Eventually you'll hit a home run, and then maybe it's just a section, but then that section is something like, it will not be unwritten. Like, you will have that forever. So if you write something that you really resonate with, maybe your church really resonates with, like, now that's yours. Like, you can sing that whenever. Like, it will not be taken from you ever. That's like my favorite thing I think about songwriting, is like, I like shifted all my language around songs too. I used to say I was really excited about songs. I don't use the word excited about songs anymore, because saying I'm excited about something puts all of my energy around that song into something out of my hands. So like into something that is out of my control, like how people respond to it, if it gets pushed to radio, if the church starts leading it, if the music video gets 1,000, whatever, like it puts it in like, oh, I'm excited about what's going to happen with this song. So I've changed it. I don't say that anymore. I just say whether or not I'm proud of a song, because what I'm proud of puts all my energy in something that has already happened and cannot be taken away from me.
That's great.
So, because otherwise I feel like for me as a professional writer, I have so many things out there that I'm just like up and down, up and down, up and down, because this one worked and this one didn't, and then this one worked and then this one tanked, everybody hated it. like it's just like this constant emotional roller coaster. Whereas if I'm just like, oh, am I proud of that one or am I not proud of that one? Then no one else's opinion, no matter what happens with it, it can die in a Google Drive, or it could be a #1 song. And it's like, oh yeah, I'm really proud of that song. And I'm just proud of what my involvement in the song and what I brought to the table. And I think having that mentality going, like even telling everybody going into those sessions when you kind of start this community, is your goal in this is not to write a song that we sing on Sunday morning from the platform. Like, that's not your goal. That's not our goal for you.
That's good.
It's like, our goal for this is us to all stretch our muscles and shake the rust off and learn how to like write some songs and have a good time tonight.
That's good.
And make something that we're proud of and we connect to, that's maybe we'll listen to in the car, and it'll help our relationship with God.
That's so
and then
good.
maybe at some point somebody will lead one of these things on Sunday morning. But like, that's not your goal. You're not failing if you don't get on the platform, and you're not succeeding because you do.
That's so good, bro. So good. What's the biggest challenge for you as a professional songwriter now?
The biggest challenge? Wow, that is a large question. Okay, I would say work-life balance was really tough. And then I read, what's the name of the book? The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. John Mark Comer. So now I do like a literal Sabbath on Sunday. I turn my phone off Saturday night. Don't turn it on until Monday morning. And like just do a bunch of nothing on Sunday. Go to church. That has been a game changer for me. That was the hardest part, because like you're always open to have a new idea, and then you got to chase that inspiration at least for a second while it's around. You can never really fully turn it off, so it's like you can maybe lay awake in bed at night and be like, oh, I have this idea for this session tomorrow. That I think has been a challenge, but I feel like I'm doing better with that now. And then finding the balance between trying to write something that I resonate with constantly. Right now, obviously, I'm very much in a season of gratitude and gratefulness, and have been probably for a couple of years, and in some ways I'll be in a grateful season, hopefully for all my life in some regards. But it's like trying to find new things to write about, but I need to write what I know. So I need to write from the place that I'm in, and I hope I'm always in just a grateful season. But like, while I still am, I can't just write 300 songs about being grateful.
Right. Even
Even if I'm only a little bit scared of something, I need to like tap into what it feels like to be afraid, and like what my response should be in that, and like bring that to God and talk to him about it in a song. It's difficult to navigate trying to have a broad variety of topic and subject matter, and again, taking pictures of the sun.
Yeah.
And so that's a challenge. And then also I'm finding it an interesting challenge right now. And this is more of a fun challenge than a truly, and it is difficult too, but trying to find those repetitive choruses that feel worth repeating, and not like they're repeating because it was the structure that we copied from Gyra, or from Good Father, like not just repeating it because like, oh yeah, that's the thing you do, is like you just say the thing over and over, but finding something that's worth saying over and over that can hit you differently, and like trying to learn how to write things like that are genuinely compelling and stir up a genuine human emotion in me, but also do these mechanical song things that I want them to do. You know?
Right. That's good, man. A few little practical questions.
Yeah.
Do you write with like pen and paper? Or are you all digital?
All digital.
All digital.
For me, I'm a Google Doc guy, collaborative, editable. And then like it's easy for song turn in and stuff, you know, copy paste and email it in and all that stuff. So digital.
Acoustic guitar is so easy to just bring in a room. Do you write mainly on acoustic or do you go to a keyboard, piano?
Thankfully, most everybody in town that I work with, either at like the Capitol Studios or at their home studio, they have a bunch of instruments just around. So I don't have to take anything. I just kind of show up, and then they've got some have like 30 guitars on the sides of the wall, and I'm just like, ooh, I can just pick a cool guitar. Yeah. And then they've got keyboard and piano and all that stuff.
Do you find yourself that does that matter at all what instrument you go on? Does it
Oh my gosh.
Does it dictate what happens?
Oh yeah.
Can you talk a bit
like
about
if you want to write a country song, do not start on piano. At least for me. Unless you want to write a ballad, like it's just gonna be hard to write like a fun country song, like a windows down if you're on piano. Like it's just not, they're gonna drive that instrument well, or it's not gonna drive that kind of song well. But if you want to, like, piano is great to start on for worship. It has that emotion and a full-bodiedness to it that you just don't get from other stringed instruments, maybe. Right. So piano is my main instrument. So like I love writing on piano because everyone is going to make fun of me, especially on this podcast. But like I play in G and transpose, the cardinal sin of this podcast. Well, but the reason I do that, and I can play in the other keys, like maybe not like sharps and flats super well, but because then I can think more about the voicings I'm using, and there are fewer options that I have to like think about, like, oh yeah, and we're in E, so if I want to play 1/3, add 9, I have to do, so instead of having to do all of that, it's kind of like wearing, like Steve Jobs wearing the black turtleneck. It's like, I'm just going to play in G. I can play in other keys, but I'm just going to play in this one in transpose because then I can put my attention toward other things and be more intentional about like, what's the voicing I want to use? What's the actual progression? What if I change the root note of this? And think about that stuff. Right. But so yeah, I like writing on piano, but then if it's like an energetic vibe, I'd rather have guitar, but I do switch in the middle of the session all the time. Like that's like a hack for me. Is like, if I spend too long on one instrument, I get stuck. I'll be like 30 minutes on piano and I'll switch over to guitar, and then 45 minutes on guitar and I'll switch back to piano. And especially if I get stuck, I switch because I'm like, okay, this is not unlocking it for me, because sometimes, I don't know, the guitar brings a different energy and the piano brings a different like emotion. Yeah. So it's like switching back and forth sometimes helps me get past a hurdle a little bit more than the other.
That's great, man. I love that. Do you have anything you'd like to mention? Any songs in particular? Any artists? Any songwriters? Anything that you'd like to give anyone any shout out to?
I mean, talking about worship stuff, I would talk about a quick story on.
Yeah, go for it.
I got to write this song with Jesus Culture called "Everything That Has Breath." And that song, we're talking about just faith and being human and walking through actual faith and not like the professional Christian side of it, and navigating all of that. And so I went to this Jesus Culture writing camp and was so honored to get to write. I wrote with Brian Torwalt and Mia Fields in the morning. And then in the second session, wrote with Lindy Kofer, my friend Jordan Sapp, and Katie Torwalt. And so the first session, I remember I wanted to nail the session because like I respect Mia and Brian so much, and I want to nail this. I want to like be the right fit for this room and hopefully get to work with them more in the future. And I remember feeling like the song was really good, but Mia is such a strong writer. Like she just kind of started going. She was writing a thing, and I was like, well, I'm not going to stop her from writing a great song. She's crushing right now. So I just kind of like did more chords, and I wound up playing a more reserved role in that session. And I wound up walking out being like, man, I just don't really feel like not like asserted myself or whatever, because that's not what writing a song is about. I feel like I was like more nervous and reserved than I needed to be because I respect them so much, but trying to also find a thing of like, I need to be confident enough in my ability and what God has called me to do where I can speak up into things and all that stuff. I remember walking out of that first session, and again, the song was awesome because they're amazing, but I remember walking out being like, man, I wish I had like spoken up more. So I kind of like have this defeated energy walking into the second session. And again, this is all in the season. Like I just signed like 6 months before, and I'm coming into a good faith season, but like still kind of shaking off the rust of like some jadedness, and still not doing a great job at like cutting through the technicalities of worship and engaging beyond being like, oh, they were late on the slide on purpose, and like, so still kind of navigating all of that, like getting out of professional, shaking off the rust. So I like walk into the second session and I was like, you know what, I was not I didn't feel like I was present very much in the first session. So I was like, I want to be like fully myself in this session. I just want to like bare my heart. I'm with Katie Torvald, who I think the world of. I just like respect everything she's been a part of, and Lindy Kofer and Jordan Sapp, who just like, again, so honored to be in the room. And I just like open up and I'm like, guys, to be honest, like my wife and I, like we haven't been going to church very often. Like we kind of quit through COVID and we were kind of watching online and we just haven't gone back in a while. It's just tough. I worked at church and she was, a part of that for a long time. And we've just been kind of jaded. And I was like, so can we just write something for the people who are in the same boat as me? Mm-hmm. Like, can we write a song for the people at church who showed up jaded, who showed up not really ready to sing? And it turned into it having more of a faith pull to it, but like a little bit more encouraged vibe. There's a line in the verse that says, we refuse to go through the motions when the king is in the room. That whole like first verse kind of came from this place of like, I'm not going to do this if we're not going to do it. Wow. I'm not going to just like sit here and act like this is all just what I do. I'm so down to worship, but if we're going to do it, I'm not going to do it just because it's Sunday at 10 a.m. and the lights are down. Like if we're going to do it, I want it to be something that's worth being involved in. If we're going to worship, like let's worship like the king walked in. Wow. So we just got to write this song that was just always been really special to me. It was kind of a hinging point on me learning that like the things that other people resonate with, a lot of times I'm learning are the things that I resonate with. And I think I was just afraid to be vulnerable in a lot of those places because, again, coming from like I've been kind of on staff at churches since I was like 14. So I was like, okay, I need to have all the answers. I need to whatever. So just being able to come in with these people who I have so much respect for and be so vulnerable and just be like, I have a hard time with this stuff. So can we write a song for that? And then them like really being so encouraging to me and rallying behind that vision and being inspired by it too. That was just a really encouraging story for me. And then to see churches leading it now, like I've had like friends who know that I wrote that song and they send me a video. Like they're not involved in the worship team, but send me a video of their church leading it. I'm like, that's just so cool to know that maybe there are people out there who showed up to church that morning in the place that I was in that season where they were just kind of jaded and like I believe, but like this is hard. Like it's hard for me to like think this is real and legit. And like the worship piece of it is, it's just cool to think that maybe that song is reaching people who were in that season that I was in.
Yep. I had no clue that you were a part of that writing. I was a part of a service where we did that song.
That's so cool.
Just like a month or two ago.
That's awesome.
It's the one. It's the one that's like everything that has breath.
Yeah.
Praise.
Yeah.
Praise. I love the hits on it. Praise it. Praise. Dude, it's so good, man.
Yeah, thank you, man.
So good.
It's special to me just because of that story. It was important for me to be able to be like, okay, I can be human and write faith songs. Wow.
It's incredible, dude.
So that was cool.
So good.
It's kind of living its life in the church space.
Dude, I want to see you write more songs like that.
Dude, thank you.
That's what I want to see, bro. But dude, thank you again so much for being on this podcast. Right after this podcast, you're headed to a songwriting session later today. And so blessings to you, in that, man. I hope it's just a wonderful time. And I bet it is hard to tap into your emotional side like all the time. Like everyone's wanting you to be on that emotional train. Yeah. How do you do that? How do you sustain that?
It's a great question. Sustain is the word. Because I'm like, I've been doing it professionally for 2.5 years.
Yeah.
As far as being signed at Capitol. So I'm still real early in the process. I want to be doing this for 20 plus, 25, 30, So I think, again, it's learning again and again and again, like just showing up as myself. Oh, if I'm feeling uninspired, maybe other people are too. Maybe we write something about feeling uninspired toward faith and trying to redeem that in some way. And I always point it, again, inspire people toward faith is my goal. That can look like a lot of things. That can look like being like, oh, I don't even know if I believe all this today. I've been there. So I'm not there now, thankfully, but I've been there. People in that place deserve to be inspired toward faith. They deserve to have songs written aimed at them to inspire them back to Jesus and back to God. Right. And then also for people who, again, are darkening the door of the church every Sunday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Monday, like
Absolutely.
Are there all the time. We're all going through different shades of the same problems, like it all comes from insecurity and fear, and we want to be liked and we want to be accepted, and belonging is so deeply important for us as humans. And I think all of that stuff. So just trying to tap into these things, because again, like you said, like I'm an opinionated and passionate person. So like just trying to find things that I actually am passionate about and not try and find things other people are passionate about and write that. Absolutely. Just trying to write the thing that I'm passionate about and think about who else would feel what I'm feeling and write the song for all of us. Because I think if you try and write it for all of them and not all of us, It can get preachy. It can feel contrived because you're not meaning what you say if you don't believe it yourself. So trying to find things, even down to each lyric, where I'm like, does that stir up faith in me, or does that like tread water until the next line? Because if it treads water, we can probably beat it. You know, so trying to think about it that way, but trying to find titles that are interesting and concepts, that is tough. And there's really no rhyme or reason. I don't know how we keep stumbling across things that people are connecting to and whatever, but you know, just I'm learning that it's easier when my genuine relationship with God is in a better place. It's easier to have a conversation with somebody who you're close with, you know.
For sure. Oh yeah, totally, man. Totally. Well, dude, tell us how we can get connected with you or follow you and stay connected with what you're doing.
Easiest place is probably Instagram. I'm really bad about posting. Like I kind of only post like when a song comes out and like, or I'll like post on Instagram, like on my story or something and just be like, hey, and then I'll just be like, wrote a great one today. And then like tag whoever I wrote with or whatever.
We'll tag you, of course, on the Worship Keys Instagram.
Would love it.
Make sure people can get connected with you so people can be a part of what God's doing in your life, man. I know this podcast hopefully has been a big help to someone out there. I believe it has been. You know, I'm believing God for it, and you're gonna do big things, bro. Big things, man.
I love getting people excited, you know, and like especially about something that I'm just genuinely passionate about, like songwriting for the church.
Absolutely.
So I love that capacity, getting to come in and just speaking into songwriting for the church and speaking at conferences and Q&A panels and all of that kind of stuff.
Again, the 4 years that I knew you and JSU, I loved being on stage with you and leading with you and seeing you writing with you just a few times and learning so much from you, man, how you piece together the lyrics, the melody. But again, I'm so grateful, and thank you again, Jonathan. Just like blown away that you even agreed to come sit down.
Dude, thank you so much for having me. I'm so stoked for what you're building with this and just making a place for people who like love church music and play keys to talk about the nerdy stuff that maybe there aren't enough people in their like hometown community to, you know, get excited about whatever. So I think creating an online space for that is so cool.